Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in our chats with Emily as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are in the Johnson edition and we turn out to poem 744, Remorse is Memory Awake. Now, this is an interesting poem for a number of reasons. By the way, when it was published in 1891, it was actually called Remorse. In many ways, I think this is Emily's responding to the teachings of her youth that she read, for example, in the King James version of the Bible in 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 4 and following. And when the chief shepherd shall appear, ye shall receive a crown of glory that fadeth not away. Likewise, ye younger, submit yourselves unto the elder. Yea, all of you be subject one to another, and be clothed with humility, for God resisteth the proud, and giveth grace to the humble. Humble yourselves therefore under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time, casting all your care upon him, for he careth for you. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil is a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. Now, this idea that once God has given you the answer to your prayers, then you should feel relieved. You shouldn't feel the tremendous sense of remorse that this poem, this definition poem, as we'll refer to it, will qualify. Now, in many ways, we're back to our study of 705. You guys will remember this one when we saw it for the first time, as she was playing the game of suspense. Suspense is hostler than death. Death, the soever broad, is just death and cannot increase. Suspense does not conclude, but perishes to live anew, but just anew to die. Annihilation plated fresh with immortality. Emily, I think, is always struggling with the question of theodicy. We commented on this, our assumptions being that you have been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you worked through our set of introductory comments where we commented on our big five. That is to say, what does this text say about epistemology, what you can know, ontology, who we are, psychology, the study of the individual mind, sociology, the study of the collective mind, and then finally the last of our big five in 303, the question of theodicy. Why must there be pain? Why must there be suffering? And why is it that there are certain things I just can't let go of? Now, if you've as well been following all of our preceding lectures, we've just finished with poem 743, The Birds Reported, then you'll be able to place this poem within the context of those others, like, for example, 705. Now, think about Emily's response to 1 Corinthians 15:3. Christ died for our sins, and therefore we should have zero remorse. The scholar Leiter will point out that in this poem, Dickinson achieves a sense of upheaval and disorientation. The syntax will even play that game. In many ways, we're back to Dante's Inferno, and that idea that there is a certain kind of saturation, as one poet called this about this poem, a saturation with a pressure of loss, the sense of loss. And remorse here, notice, different from guilt, right? Remorse is that feeling that's incited by guilt. The regret or the self-reproach is the game that she'll be playing here. And she'll never give us the real reason why she feels this sense of remorse, but here it is nonetheless. The scholar Priest, by the way, quotes Sewell in the introduction to this one. Sewell thinks that the remorse that was cureless for Emily was the mistaken judgment that both she and her brother Austin made about Sue. In Sewell's words, quote, "At the center of her being must have been the gnawing realization of an early mistaken judgment, hers as well as Austin's, a youthful affinity that came to nothing, the lifelong suffering to which that mistake had condemned her brother, and the tension and the anxiety it had brought them all. The tragedy only a hedge away had to be and was lived through." Of course, the hedge away, obviously the juxtaposition of the two domiciles. Let's now read the poem and hear what Emily has to say about why there are some things she just can't let go of. Remorse is memory awake, her parties all astir, a presence of departed acts at window and at door. Its past set down before the soul and lighted with a match, perusal to facilitate and help belief to stretch. Remorse is cureless. the disease not even God can heal, for 'tis his institution and the adequate of hell. Now, it's interesting that Emily seems to be suggesting that if you want to live in your own hell, then you live with remorse. But welcome to the human condition. We all live with certain variations of remorse. Why? Because the memory is always awake. It always claims what it wants to forget. And the moment we start thinking about it, well, there we are, back with this sense of remorse. By the way, I'll just point out at 7:45, the poem to follow, we're going to have renunciation is a piercing virtue. And you'll notice the construction of remorse is, renunciation is. By the way, let's just begin by forecasting. When we get to poem 1051, we'll be playing a similar game with this topic of remorse. I cannot meet the spring unmoved. I feel the old desire. A hurry with a lingering mixed a warrant to be fair. A competition in my sense with something hid in her. And as she vanishes, remorse, I saw no more of her. This idea of holding on to something. Emily, the great poet of psychology, we've said so many times. Remorse is, notice capitalized, memory awake. In other words, we keep coming back to it. And she'll say, her parties all astir. It's interesting she uses the word parties here. I don't know that she's talking necessarily about parties as in to have a party, but maybe like parties as in the juxtaposition of different groups or warring parties, if you'll think about it that way. The word astir is, of course, the key word of the poem. In other words, you know this phrase, dredging up. Emily clearly plays this game here. A presence of departed acts, things happening in the past, at window and at door. Notice the personification here of reason as being somehow coming, attacking the house from all sides. It's past, notice dash, set down before the soul. Notice all these dashes that make this poem a kind of jumpy to read, right? It's past, set down before the soul. I think of the set down, and I think about T.S. Eliot's Journey of Magi, set this down. We've given full lectures at learnstrong.net. It's past, set down before the soul. In 67 poems, she uses the word soul. It appears in her poetry 141 times. And notice, lighted with a match. In other words, it comes back, and it's like in the darkness, all of a sudden the light comes on, and here it is. And of course, the match can cause light, can cause a fire as well. Perusal to facilitate and help belief to stretch. In other words, you can't get it out. The splinter in the mind, if you will. The thing that has happened in the past that leads to a certain sense of remorse. Again, we can follow Sewell that Emily is referencing here, the remorse she has about the relationship she has with Sue. I think there's any number of things that happened in Emily's life that could lead to this level of remorse. Remorse, she comes back to it now, is cureless. Well, this is right away, the disease not even God can heal. This takes us back, as we said, to 1 Corinthians 15:3. Christ died for our sins, and of course, as we said, 1 Peter 5:4-8, this idea that Christ alleviates this kind of sense of remorse. So what is going on? Is she being blasphemous here in some regards? She calls remorse a disease. We have to think immediately of Dante's Inferno as well as Milton's Hell as well. As she references that remorse is the disease God can't even kill. For 'tis his, notice capitalized, institution. In other words, the origination of all this remorse comes, she says, from the way in which God tells us there are certain ways we should behave, and then when we don't behave those ways, now we feel remorse, we feel shame, applied guilt. The adequate of hell, she says. You'll remember 640 and hell when we did that poem, just to remind you of it, that it went like this: I cannot live with you. It would be life, and life over there behind the shelf the sexton keeps the key to. Putting up our life is porcelain like a cup, discarded if the housewife clean or broke. A newer Severus pleases, old ones crack. I could not die with you, for one must wait to shut the other's gaze down. You could not, and I could I but stand by and see you freeze without my right of frost, death's privilege. Nor could I rise with you, because your face would put out Jesus's, that new grace, grown plain and foreign on a homesick eye, except that you, than he, shone closer by. They judge us, how? For you, served heaven, you know, or sought to. I could not, because you saturated sight, and I had no more eyes for sordid excellence's paradise. And were you lost, I would be, though my name rang loudest on the heavenly fame. And were you saved, and I condemned to be, where you were not, that self were hell to me. Where you were not, that self were hell to me. So we must meet apart. You there I hear, with just the door ajar, that oceans are in prayer, and that white sustenance despair. Notice this idea, if I can't have what I want, that actually is hell. When we get to 1732, at the very end of our study, she'll say it in one of her most famous poems, "My life closed twice before its close. It yet remains to see if immortality unveil a third event to me, so huge, so hopeless to conceive, as these that twice befell." And then the famous line, "Parting is all we know of heaven, and all we need of hell." This idea then, that hell, as Dante argues, not a place we go, but something we have to go through. Now, when we get to 753 here in just a little bit of our study, we're going to come back to this idea. "My soul accused me, and I quailed, as tongues of diamond had reviled. All else accused me, and I smiled. My soul that morning was my friend. Her favor is the best disdain toward artifice of time or men, but her disdain toward light or bear, a finger of enameled fire." This idea of disdain marrying to the idea of remorse. When we get to 1598, we'll come back to this poem again. "Who is it seeks my pillow nights, with plain inspecting face? Did you, or did you not, to ask? 'Tis conscience, childhood's nurse. With martial hand she strokes the hair upon my wincing head." Notice wincing. "All rogues shall have their part in what? The phosphorus of God." And then finally, when we get to 1601, "Of God we ask one favor, that we may be forgiven, for what he is presumed to know, the crime from us is hidden. Immured the whole of life within a magic prison, we reprimand the happiness that too competes with heaven." There is this tension for Emily, and I think this is the point at 2a. It's hard to let go of the stuff that we cannot undo. And I think it makes sense that we read many of Emily's poems with this kind of psychic tension as happening. In terms of 2b and rhetoric, well, the rhymes are obviously imperfect. Ironically, a scholar will say, yoking heel and hell in the concluding stanza, for example. There are intricate echoes of sounds, especially alliterative, right? Like parties, presence, past, perusal, departed, door, down, disease, or set, soul, stretch, or heel, his, hell, as well as examples of consonants here. Remorse, memory, or her, parties, astir, presence, departed, door, or remorse, cureless, or is, disease, tis, his. Emily's playing a profound sound game here as well. And of course, as well at 2b, we don't know the cause or the source of all this remorse that she's talking about. At 3a, well, clearly Dante, you'll remember that when we give him full lectures at learnstrong.net, you'll remember that one of the terrible punishments in hell are for those who simply walk in a circle sighing all the time because they never could in life quite make up their mind or live with the fact that they had made decisions they couldn't undo. Of course, Milton as well comes to mind. Finally, at 3b, to own a poem like this, how have you wrestled with this whole issue of remorse? And how do you learn to let go? Thank you.